standing in that duty-free shop, reading my daughter-in-law's text. You make our lives miserable. Think about it while we're on vacation. I felt my patience finally die. The message wasn't just words, it was a deliberate execution, timed for maximum impact while I stood surrounded by strangers with overpriced perfume. I pocketed the phone, paid for my items. They just taught me that cruelty required creativity. Time for my masterclass. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories. The waiting area buzzed with typical airport energy. Families juggling luggage, business travelers checking phones, children whining about delays. Our little group sat in the row of black plastic chairs near Gate 12, and I could feel the familiar undercurrent of tension that seemed to follow us everywhere lately. My daughter-in-law, Lisa, sat with her arms crossed, scrolling through her phone with sharp, irritated movements. My grandson fidgeted in the seat beside her, his headphone cord hopelessly tangled around the armrest. "Here, buddy, let me help you with that," I said, reaching over to untangle the mess. Lisa glanced up, her expression tightening slightly. "He can figure it out himself." I paused, my hands still on the cord. "It's no trouble." "I know it's no trouble for you." Her voice carried that edge I'd learned to recognize. Not quite sharp enough to cause a scene, but pointed enough to draw blood. But maybe he should learn to handle these things on his own. My son shifted uncomfortably in his chair, shooting a look between us. The departure board overhead showed 25 minutes until boarding. Still plenty of time, but Lisa's mood suggested we were already running late for something. "You're right," I said quietly, pulling my hands back. My grandson looked up at me with confusion, the cord still twisted around his small fingers. "Grandpa, it's stuck," he whispered. "Your mom wants you to work it out yourself," I replied, hating the disappointment that flickered across his face. I caught the hint of a satisfied smirk on Lisa's face as she returned to her phone. Small victories, I suppose. "Oh, damn," my son suddenly said, patting his pockets. "We forgot to grab travel toothbrushes, and I think the camera charger is still plugged in at home." He looked around as if these missing items might materialize from thin air. Lisa sighed dramatically. "How are we supposed to?" she started. "I can run over to duty free," I offered, already starting to stand. "Quick trip, grab whatever you need." My son's relief was immediate. "Would you, Dad? That would be great. Just, the basics, toothbrushes, maybe a phone charger just in case." "Sure thing." I stood, grateful for an excuse to step away from whatever was brewing between them. 20 minutes should be plenty of time. Lisa didn't look up from her phone, but I caught her small nod of approval. Finally, something I could do that met with her satisfaction. Leave. The duty-free shop sprawled before me like a maze of overpriced temptation. Perfumes, chocolates, electronics, and travel essentials scattered across gleaming displays. I made my way through the aisles, scanning for the items my son had mentioned. 20 minutes until boarding. Plenty of time if I stayed focused. Travel toothbrushes were easy enough to find, tucked between packets of aspirin and tiny tubes of toothpaste. I grabbed a 2-pack, then paused at the display of energy bars. My grandson always got cranky on long flights without snacks. I selected a chocolate-covered granola bar, the kind he'd pestered me for at the grocery store last month. The camera charger proved more elusive. I wandered past displays of duty-free liquor and designer sunglasses, growing more frustrated with each passing minute. Finally, I spotted a sales associate, a young woman with a practiced smile and a name tag reading, "Jennifer." "Excuse me," I said, approaching her station near the electronics. "I'm looking for a camera charger, universal type. Do you carry those?" She tilted her head thoughtfully. "We should have something like that, yes. Let me check our storage area. Sometimes the popular items get moved to the back when the displays run low." "How long would that take?" I glanced toward the departure gate, visible through the shop's glass front. "I'm cutting it close on time here." "Oh, just a few minutes," Jennifer assured me, already heading toward a door marked staff only. "Wait right here. I'll be quick about it." I nodded, trying to shake off the lingering irritation from Lisa's earlier comments. This was what I did. Solved problems, made things easier for everyone. Even when the appreciation felt increasingly rare, the habit persisted. While Jennifer searched, I doubled back through the aisles, adding a pack of wet wipes to my growing collection. Travel with my grandson always meant preparing for the unexpected, and Lisa would probably find some way to criticize me if he got sticky fingers without proper cleanup supplies. My phone showed 12 minutes until boarding when Jennifer returned, holding up a compact camera charger with multiple adapter tips. "This should work for most cameras," she said, sounding pleased with herself. "Universal compatibility, and it's compact for travel." "Perfect, thank you." I followed her to the checkout counter where a line of 3 people had formed ahead of me. My chest tightened as I watched the minutes tick by. Lisa would have something to say if I made them wait for boarding. The line moved with agonizing slowness. A businessman ahead of me couldn't decide between 2 bottles of cologne, testing each one multiple times while the cashier waited with strained patience. Behind him, an elderly couple counted exact change for a bag of chocolate truffles, each coin deliberated over with methodical care. 8 minutes until boarding. "Excuse me," I said, stepping slightly forward. "I hate to ask, but my flight's about to board. Would it be possible to—" "Of course, go ahead," the businessman said immediately, gesturing me forward. The elderly couple nodded their approval, smiling with the kind of understanding that comes from decades of travel experience. "Thank you so much," I said, genuinely grateful as I approached the counter. Jennifer rang up my items efficiently: toothbrushes, charger, granola bar, wet wipes. "Traveling with family?" she asked, making polite conversation as she bagged everything. "My son and his family, yes." The words felt strange in my mouth, loaded with complications she couldn't possibly understand. My phone buzzed against my leg as she handed me the receipt. Probably my son wondering where I was, or maybe asking me to grab something else I'd forgotten. I pulled it out, expecting to see his name on the screen. Instead, I saw Lisa's name, and below it, words that made my blood stop moving. "You make our lives miserable. Think about it while we're on vacation." The bag of purchases felt suddenly weightless in my hand. Jennifer was saying something about having a good trip, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Around me, the duty-free shop continued its cheerful commerce, travelers selecting last-minute gifts, couples debating perfume choices, children pressing their faces against the candy display. I stood frozen at the counter, staring at the screen, reading the message again to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. But there it was, brutal in its clarity. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. A deliberate, calculated dismissal delivered with surgical precision at the moment when I'd literally been running errands for them. "Sir? Are you all right?" Jennifer's voice cut through my stupor. I looked up, realizing I'd been standing there long enough to draw her concern. Behind me, the elderly couple was shuffling forward, ready to complete their purchase. "Fine," I managed, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Just fine." I walked out of the duty-free shop on unsteady legs, the message still glowing on my phone screen. Through the terminal's windows, I could see planes taxiing on the runway, carrying families toward their perfect vacations. Families that apparently didn't include problematic fathers who made their lives miserable. The announcement for boarding Group A echoed through the terminal, and I realized with crystalline clarity that I wouldn't be joining them. I walked back through the terminal on autopilot, my legs carrying me toward Gate 12, while my mind struggled to process what had just happened. The departure lounge buzzed with the usual pre-flight energy, but our row of seats sat empty now, except for a few scattered belongings. My jacket draped over the armrest where I'd left it, my carry-on bag tucked beneath the seat, exactly as I'd positioned it an hour ago when this was still a family vacation. My boarding pass nowhere to be seen. The absence of that small piece of paper told me everything I needed to know. This hadn't been an oversight or a last-minute change of plans. They'd taken my boarding pass deliberately, planned this moment of abandonment while I'd been running their errands like a faithful servant. I stood there for a moment, staring at my belongings, the physical remnants of a man who'd believed he was going on vacation with his family. Other passengers flowed around me, dragging their suitcases toward their gates, their departures, their adventures. None of them had been discarded like damaged luggage. A gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom. "Final boarding call for Flight 447 to Cabo San Lucas. All remaining passengers should board immediately." My flight. Their flight. The distinction felt important now. I picked up my jacket and slung my carry-on over my shoulder, then carefully placed the duty-free bag inside. The travel toothbrushes, the camera charger, the granola bar for my grandson, all purchased with the assumption that I'd be there to see them used. The wet wipes for sticky fingers I'd never get to clean. I didn't check my phone for missed calls or messages. I didn't approach the gate agent to ask about the missing boarding pass. I didn't try to reach my son or demand an explanation. Some betrayals were so complete they required no clarification. Instead, I walked toward the exit signs, my footsteps steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Behind me, I heard the final announcement for my flight, followed by the pneumatic whoosh of the jet bridge retracting. The plane that was supposed to carry me to a week in paradise with my family would leave without me. Good. Let it go. The taxi line outside the terminal moved quickly. I climbed into a yellow cab and gave the driver my address, settling back into the vinyl seat as we pulled away from the curb. Through the rear window, I watched the airport shrink behind us, taking my old assumptions about family loyalty with it. "Rough day?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent years navigating other people's destinations. "You could say that." I surprised myself by answering. Usually, I preferred silence during taxi rides, but something about his genuine concern loosened my tongue. "Just experienced what you might call a family betrayal." He nodded knowingly. "Ah, the worst kind. Blood's supposed to mean something, you know?" I used to think so. I stared out the window at the city passing by. Spent years putting their needs first, solving their problems, keeping the peace, and this is how they repay it, ditching me at the airport like I'm some embarrassing relative they're ashamed to be seen with. "That's cold, man. Real cold." The driver shook his head. "So what you gonna do about it?" The question hung in the air between us. What was I gonna do about it? The old me would have called them, apologized for whatever perceived offense had triggered this treatment, begged for another chance to prove my worth. The old me would have absorbed this humiliation and asked for more. But sitting in that taxi with Lisa's words still burning in my phone and the taste of public abandonment fresh in my mouth, I felt something different crystallizing inside me. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too unstable. This was something colder, more deliberate. "I'm not going to tolerate it," I said finally. For too long, I've been the one making compromises, swallowing my pride, keeping everyone else comfortable. But tolerance of disrespect just invites more of it, doesn't it? The driver caught my eye in the mirror and nodded approvingly. "Now you're talking. Sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences. Can't just treat folks like garbage and expect them to keep coming back for more." Exactly. The word came out with more conviction than I'd felt in years. They want to exclude me from their lives? Fine, but they're about to learn that it works both ways. We pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later. The house looked the same as when I'd left it this morning. Same neat lawn, same welcoming front porch, same sense of stability I'd worked decades to build. But I felt different approaching it. Less like a man returning from a failed vacation, more like a general returning to headquarters to plan his campaign. "You take care of yourself," the driver said as I handed him the fare plus a generous tip. "And remember, sometimes the best revenge is just living well without the people who don't appreciate you." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "I think you're absolutely right." I stood on my front porch, key in hand, and looked back at the taxi disappearing down the street. Inside my house, I'd begin the process of reshaping my life around people who actually wanted me in it. The family that had abandoned me at the airport would discover that I wasn't as disposable as they'd assumed. I turned the key and stepped inside, ready to begin. The house felt different as I closed the door behind me, quieter, somehow more mine than it had been this morning. I dropped my bags in the hallway and walked straight to the kitchen, where I kept the folder of vacation documents. The hotel confirmation sat on top, crisp and official, a monument to my careful planning and financial investment in what was supposed to be a family bonding experience. I pulled out my phone and dialed the resort's reservations number. "Casa del Mar Resort. This is Miguel speaking. How may I assist you today?" "I need to cancel a reservation," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Confirmation number 4A7B9X2L. There was a pause as he pulled up the details. I see here a 7-night ocean view suite for 4 guests checking in today. May I ask the reason for cancellation, sir? Plans changed. I understand. However, I need to inform you that with less than 24 hours notice, our cancellation policy allows for only a partial refund. You'll forfeit approximately 60% of the total amount. I did the math in my head. 60% of $3,800. Nearly $2,300 gone, just like that. A month ago, the loss would have made me physically sick. Today, it felt like paying a small fee for a much larger education. That's fine, I said. Today, I lost far more than money, so this doesn't really matter in comparison. Miguel paused, perhaps caught off guard by my philosophical response to financial loss. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I'll process the cancellation immediately. You should see the partial refund within 5 to 7 business days. Thank you, Miguel. Have a good day. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the folder full of itineraries I'd carefully researched and planned. The snorkeling excursion I'd booked for my grandson, the sunset dinner cruise I'd thought would be romantic for my son and Lisa, the spa day I'd arranged as a peace offering to smooth over whatever tensions had been building between us. All of it purchased with the assumption that I was wanted, needed, appreciated. All of it canceled now with a single phone call. I spent the rest of the evening putting things in order, not the frantic, desperate organizing of a man trying to regain control, but the methodical preparations of someone who had finally accepted reality. I filed the vacation paperwork under lessons learned and made myself a simple dinner. No point in cooking for a crowd that would never come. The next morning arrived with October sunshine streaming through my kitchen windows. I made coffee, read the newspaper, and enjoyed the peaceful silence of a house that belonged entirely to me. It was almost noon when my phone started ringing. Lisa's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering, no longer feeling the old urgency to jump at her demands. Hello, Lisa? What the hell did you do? Her voice cut through the phone with the sharp edge I'd grown to expect. No greeting, no acknowledgement of yesterday's events, just immediate accusation. I'm not sure what you're referring to. The hotel, Dad. The hotel says our reservation was canceled. Do you have any idea what you've done? We're standing here with our luggage and 2 exhausted children, and they're telling us there's no room. I took a sip of my coffee, noting how she still called me Dad when she needed something from me. Oh, that. Yes, I canceled the reservation yesterday. You canceled. Her voice pitched higher. Why would you do that? This was supposed to be a learning experience for you, a chance to think about your behavior. Instead, you're being petty and vindictive. A learning experience. I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting its bitter flavor. Is that what you call abandoning me at the airport? We thought some space might help you understand how overwhelming you can be, but this is just spiteful. How are we supposed to explain this to the kids? Your grandson is asking where Grandpa is, and now we don't even have a place to stay. There it was. The manipulation I'd been expecting. Use the child as a weapon, make me the villain in his disappointment. The old me would have crumbled at the mention of my grandson's confusion, would have offered to book them another room, would have apologized for daring to have feelings about their treatment. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare try to manipulate me through my grandson. I'm not manipulating. You are. And I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. You want to talk about learning experiences? Here's mine. I've learned that I don't have to accept being treated like garbage by people who are supposed to care about me. You're being dramatic. Am I? You literally abandoned me at an airport, Lisa. Left me standing there like discarded luggage while you flew off to a vacation I was paying for. And now you want me to feel guilty because there are consequences? The line went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from anger to injured righteousness. We just needed some family time without complications. Complications. That's what I am to you? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. And you know what? Message received. But here's something for you to consider. My grandson isn't suffering because of my actions, Lisa. He's suffering because of yours. You're the ones who decided to exclude his grandfather from a family vacation. You're the ones who created the situation. We can work this out. I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it face down on the table and finished my coffee in peace, listening to the sound of my own breathing in my own kitchen. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The morning after Lisa's frantic phone call, I sat in my home office with my address book open, looking at names I hadn't called in months. Professional contacts, business associates, people who had hired my son and daughter-in-law based on my personal recommendations. People who trusted my judgment because we'd built relationships over decades. Time to have some honest conversations. First call. Richard Thompson, senior partner at the marketing firm where Lisa worked part-time. We'd known each other for 15 years, served on the Chamber of Commerce together, played golf every few months. When Lisa needed work after her previous employer downsized, Richard had created a position for her based entirely on my word. Richard, it's me. Do you have a minute to talk? Of course. How's retirement treating you? Still working on that deck project? Actually, I'm calling about Lisa, my daughter-in-law who's working for you. His tone shifted slightly, becoming more professional. Is everything all right? She's been doing good work for us. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of what I was about to do, but the memory of standing abandoned in that duty-free shop strengthened my resolve. Richard, I need to tell you something, and it's not easy. Yesterday, Lisa and my son abandoned me at the airport, literally left me behind when they went on a family vacation that I had paid for. I found out I wasn't welcome through a text message she sent me while they were boarding the plane. Silence on the other end. I could almost hear him processing this information, trying to reconcile the professional woman he knew with the person I was describing. Jesus, he said finally. Are you serious? Dead serious. The text said, I make their lives miserable, and I should think about it while they're on vacation. This from a woman whose job you created as a favor to me, whose family I've been financially supporting for years. I don't know what to say. That's horrible. The thing is, Richard, I recommended her to you based on family loyalty, not professional merit. I thought you deserved to know the kind of person you're really dealing with, someone who bites the hand that feeds her, who treats family members like disposable objects when they're no longer convenient. Another long pause. When Richard spoke again, his voice was colder, more distant. I appreciate you telling me this. It certainly puts some of her recent behavior in perspective. The entitlement, the resistance to feedback. I'm not asking you to fire her, I said, though we both knew that's exactly what would happen. I'm just giving you information you should have had from the beginning. Second call. Jim Martinez, the construction company owner who'd hired my son as a project manager 2 years ago. Jim and I had served together on the Veterans Advisory Board, bonded over our shared military experience. When Michael needed work after his layoff, Jim had fast-tracked him through the hiring process as a personal favor. Jim, it's about Michael. I need to tell you what kind of man you really hired. The conversation followed a similar pattern. Jim's initial confusion giving way to shocked silence, then a hard anger that I recognized from our military days. Men like us didn't tolerate betrayal, especially from people we'd gone out of our way to help. You know what gets me? Jim said after I'd finished the story. I gave that boy responsibilities I wouldn't normally trust to someone with his limited experience, because I trusted your judgment about his character. I was wrong about his character, Jim, and you deserved better from both of us. By the time I'd finished my calls, the morning was nearly gone. I'd spoken to 6 different people who'd hired, promoted, or otherwise helped my son and daughter-in-law based on my recommendations. Each conversation left me feeling lighter, cleaner, like I was finally telling the truth after years of covering for their failings. Now, for the financial nuclear option. I pulled out the folder containing their mortgage information and dialed the bank's customer service line. The automatic payment I'd been making for 8 months was scheduled to go through in 3 days. Time to stop pretending their problems were my problems. First National Bank, this is Sandra speaking. I need to cancel an automatic payment arrangement, I said, providing my account number and my son's loan details. I've been covering their monthly mortgage payments, but that arrangement is ending immediately. I can certainly help you with that, sir. May I ask the reason for the cancellation? I discovered that the borrowers view me as disposable while expecting me to remain financially indispensable. I'm correcting that misunderstanding. Sandra paused, clearly unsure how to respond to my unusual explanation. I see. The automatic payment will be canceled immediately. However, the borrowers will need to make alternative arrangements to avoid default. That's their problem now. I hung up and sat back in my chair, feeling a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. In 3 hours, I'd systematically dismantled the professional and financial safety net I'd spent years building for people who'd thrown me away like garbage. It felt like performing surgery on my own life, cutting away the diseased tissue that had been slowly poisoning everything. My phone rang 2 hours later, Lisa's name on the screen, but when I answered, her voice was different than it had been yesterday. Gone was the self-righteous anger, replaced by something sharper, more desperate. "What did you do?" she hissed into the phone. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." Richard called me into his office an hour ago. He was asking questions about my family situation, my relationship with you. He looked at me like I was some kind of criminal. Interesting. What kind of questions? Don't play dumb with me, you bastard. I know you called him. I know you're trying to sabotage my job because you're having a tantrum about the airport. The mask was completely off now. No more pretense of family concern or educational lessons. Just raw, ugly anger from someone who'd been caught and exposed. A tantrum, I repeated slowly. Is that what you think this is? I think you're a vindictive old man who can't handle being told the truth about himself, and if you think you can destroy our lives because your feelings got hurt. What will you do? I interrupted, my voice calm. What exactly will you do, Lisa? She sputtered for a moment, clearly not expecting the question. We'll see what we can do. There are consequences for this kind of behavior. I'm looking forward to finding out what those might be. In the meantime, you might want to start looking for alternative employment and housing. I understand your mortgage payment is due next week. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You can't do this. We have children. You should have thought about your children before you decided to discard their grandfather at an airport. I hung up and immediately turned off the phone. Let them stew in the consequences of their choices. Let them discover what life looked like without the safety net they'd taken for granted while treating me like an inconvenience. 20 minutes later, the landline rang. My son's voice strained and desperate. Dad, please. We need to talk. I'm listening. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand. Lisa's in tears. She might lose her job, and now the mortgage company is calling about missed payments. Sounds like you're experiencing some consequences. How does it feel? Dad, please. I need you to understand what happened at the airport. That wasn't my idea. Lisa told me you were okay with staying home, that you'd mentioned wanting some alone time. I didn't know she'd taken your boarding pass until we were already in the air. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired its construction. Almost. Stop, I said quietly. Dad, stop lying to me, Michael. I'm your father, not some stranger you can manipulate with a convenient story. I'm not lying. You sat in that departure lounge for 20 minutes after I left for duty free. You watched them call for boarding. You handed over your boarding passes, walked down that jet bridge, and found your seats. At what point during those 20 minutes did you wonder where your father was? Silence. At what point did you ask your wife where my boarding pass was? At what point did you suggest maybe we should wait for Dad before taking off for the family vacation he paid for? Lisa was stressed about the kids, and I didn't want to cause a scene. There it is. You didn't want to cause a scene with your wife, so you were willing to abandon your father instead. That's not fair. Fair? I felt something cold settle in my chest. Was it fair when you let her send me that text message? Was it fair when you sat in your airplane seat knowing I was somewhere in that airport, confused and hurt, while you flew off to paradise on my dime? Dad, you don't understand. Lisa can make life hell when she's angry. The silent treatment, the manipulation, turning the kids against me. Then you have bigger problems than my hurt feelings, don't you? You've chosen to live with a woman who manipulates you through your own children. That's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to subsidize. What do you want from me? I said I was sorry. I want you to stop pretending you were a helpless victim in this situation. You made a choice, son. When your wife decided to exclude your father from a family vacation, you could have put your foot down. You could have insisted that we were a family, and families don't abandon each other at airports. She would have been furious. So you chose keeping your wife happy over treating your father with basic human decency. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel him scrambling for the right words to fix this, to get me back in line, to restore the old order where I absorbed their disrespect and paid their bills without complaint. Dad, please. I know I screwed up, but canceling our mortgage payments, calling our employers, you're not just punishing us. You're punishing the kids too. And there it was, the final card he thought he could play. Use the children as human shields, make me the villain in their suffering. Those children, I said slowly, are not being punished by me. They're experiencing the consequences of their parents' choices. You and Lisa decided I was disposable. The problem is, you made that decision while still expecting me to be indispensable to your financial survival. So what? You're just going to destroy our lives completely? I'm going to stop pretending that a relationship built on financial dependence and emotional abuse is the same thing as family love. You want a relationship with me, Michael? Build one that doesn't require my bank account or my willingness to accept disrespect. Dad, wait. I hung up and sat back in my chair, looking out at my neighborhood. Across the street, the Hendersons were working in their garden, their teenage daughter helping them plant bulbs for spring. A normal family doing normal things, probably not one of them worrying about being abandoned by the people they loved most. I envied them that certainty, that trust. But I was done paying for the illusion of it in my own life. Let my son and his wife discover what the world looked like without the father and grandfather they decided was expendable. They were about to learn that some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt with apologies and desperate phone calls. Some consequences can't be undone with tears and manipulation. And some fathers, once pushed too far, stop coming back. The doorbell rang at 8:30 on Thursday morning, 2 days before they were supposed to return from their paradise vacation. I was in my kitchen, enjoying my second cup of coffee and reading the newspaper in blessed silence when the sharp pop, insistent chiming shattered my peace. Through the front window, I could see the rental car in my driveway, a silver SUV with luggage still strapped to the roof. My son stood on my front porch, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a nervous teenager. Behind him, Lisa paced back and forth, her face a mask of barely contained fury. The children sat in the back seat of the car, pressed against the windows, watching the adults with the wide-eyed confusion of kids who sensed something terrible was happening but couldn't understand what. I took my time getting to the door. Let them wait. Let them stew in whatever cocktail of desperation and rage had driven them to cut their vacation short and fly across the country to confront me. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more demanding. When I finally opened the door, Michael's face was a study in exhaustion and stress. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble he hadn't bothered to shave, clothes that looked like they'd been slept in. Lisa appeared behind him like a storm cloud, her designer vacation outfit wrinkled and her perfectly styled hair disheveled. "Dad," Michael said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." "Good morning to you too," I replied, making no move to invite them in. "You're back early. How was paradise?" Lisa pushed past my son, her eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. "Cut the shit. You know exactly why we're here." "Lisa," Michael warned, shooting a glance toward the car where his children were watching. "No," she snapped, whirling on him. "I'm done pretending this is some reasonable family disagreement. Your father has lost his mind, and I'm not going to stand here and play nice while he destroys our lives." I leaned against my doorframe, studying them both. The power dynamic had shifted completely since our last conversation. They'd come here expecting to intimidate me, to corner me on my own turf and force me back into my old role as the family's financial safety net. Instead, they looked like refugees from their own bad decisions. You sabotaged my job, Lisa continued, her voice rising. You called Richard and filled his head with lies about me. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told him the truth, I said calmly. I told him exactly what kind of person he was employing, someone who bites the hand that feeds her. Those weren't lies. They were facts. Facts you'd prefer remained hidden because they make you look like the ungrateful, manipulative person you actually are. Michael stepped between us, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Dad, please, let's not do this on the front porch. Can we come inside and talk about this rationally? I looked past him to the car, where my grandson was pressed against the window, his small face creased with worry. For a moment I felt the old familiar tug of guilt, the instinct to smooth things over for the children's sake. But that instinct had been exploited too many times, used as a weapon against my own interests. 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside to let them in, and the children stay in the car. We moved to my living room, where I'd spent the last few days in peaceful solitude, reading books I'd neglected for years while managing their crises. Lisa immediately began pacing again, unable to sit still, her nervous energy filling the room like static electricity. You have to fix this, she said without preamble. Call Richard back, tell him you were upset and said things you didn't mean. Tell him I'm a good employee and that family problems shouldn't affect my work. I settled into my favorite armchair and looked at her with genuine curiosity. Why would I do that? Because. She stopped mid-sentence, clearly having expected a different response. Because we're family. Because you can't just destroy people's lives over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I savored the word. Is that what you're calling it now? Abandoning me at an airport is a misunderstanding? Michael sat heavily on my couch, his head in his hands. Dad, I know what happened was wrong. I know we hurt you, but this scorched earth approach isn't helping anyone. It's helping me tremendously, I replied. For the first time in years, I'm not subsidizing people who treat me like garbage. It's remarkably liberating. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest about what you did, about who you really are, about what this relationship has actually been. I stood up and walked to my desk, where I'd prepared for this exact conversation. Since you're here, though, there's something we need to discuss. I pulled out a manila folder and handed it to Michael. Legal documents. I had my attorney draw them up yesterday. He opened the folder with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the papers inside. I watched his face go pale as he read, watched him realize the full scope of what I was demanding. A promissory note, he said weakly, for the mortgage payments. Every penny I've paid toward your house for the last 8 months, I confirmed. $26,400, plus interest. I want it back. Lisa snatched the papers from his hands, her eyes widening as she read. You can't be serious. This is extortion. This is accountability. You wanted to exclude me from your family? Fine, but you don't get to keep the benefits of being related to me while discarding the obligations. We don't have this kind of money. Then you shouldn't have bitten the hand that was paying your bills. Michael looked up from the papers, his face a mask of desperation. Dad, please, be reasonable. We can work something out, make monthly payments. Sign it or I file a lawsuit, I said simply. And trust me, Michael, you don't want me to take this to court. You can't sue family members for gifts. Watch me. I walked back to my desk and pulled out another thicker folder. I've been documenting every cent I've spent on your family for the last 3 years. The mortgage payments, the insurance premiums, the car repairs, the emergency loans that became gifts, the vacation expenses, all of it. I dropped the folder on the coffee table between us with a satisfying thud. $47,000 in total support. In court, I'll argue that these weren't gifts. They were loans made in good faith to family members who I believed loved and respected me. Loans that become immediately due when those family members demonstrate that the relationship was based on financial exploitation rather than genuine affection. Lisa's face had gone white. You're bluffing. Am I? Call my attorney if you want. His number's on the letterhead. Ask him how confident he is about our case. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of my grandfather clock and the sound of Lisa's rapid breathing. Through the window, I could see my grandson still watching from the car, his small hands pressed against the glass. You're destroying your relationship with your grandchildren, Lisa said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Is your pride really worth never seeing them again? The threat hung in the air like smoke. The nuclear option she'd been saving for this moment, using my love for those children as a weapon against me one final time. I looked at her for a long moment, feeling something settle inside me, a calm I hadn't felt in years. You know what's interesting about that threat, Lisa? I said quietly. It assumes I'm going to let you continue using my grandchildren as bargaining chips in your manipulation games. It assumes I'm going to spend the rest of my life walking on eggshells, afraid that you'll withhold access to them if I don't keep paying your bills and accepting your disrespect. I walked to the window and looked out at the car, where both children were now staring at the house with worried expressions. Those children deserve better than parents who teach them that love is conditional on financial benefit. They deserve better than watching their grandfather be treated like garbage by the people who are supposed to care about him. I turned back to face them. And honestly, they deserve better than you. Michael made a strangled sound. Dad, you don't mean that. I mean every word. You want to keep me away from my grandchildren? Go ahead. Explain to them when they're older why Grandpa disappeared from their lives. Tell them how you abandoned him at an airport when he wouldn't be your personal ATM anymore. See how that story holds up when they're old enough to understand what really happened. Lisa's composure finally cracked completely. You bastard, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You vindictive, heartless bastard. I'm a man who finally learned to stop accepting abuse from people who never loved him in the first place, I replied. Sign the papers or don't. But get off my property and don't come back unless you're prepared to treat me with the respect any human being deserves. Michael stood up slowly, the legal documents clutched in his shaking hands. Dad, please. There has to be another way. There was another way, I said. It was called treating your father like family instead of like a resource to be exploited. You chose a different path. We can change. You had decades to change. You chose not to. I walked to the front door and held it open. This is what consequences look like, son. This is what happens when you push someone too far. They gathered their things in silence, Lisa's sobs echoing through my living room as she realized that her tears and threats had no power here anymore. Michael paused at the door, looking back at me with something that might have been regret. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For all of it, I'm so sorry, Dad. I know you are, I replied. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there are consequences, but you're not sorry for what you did. If you were, you would have gotten off that plane. I watched them walk to their car, watched Lisa collapse into the passenger seat while Michael tried to explain to confused children why Grandpa wasn't coming with them. Watched them drive away from my house and out of my life, carrying with them the legal documents that would remind them every month for the next several years that some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt with apologies. As their rental car disappeared around the corner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete and total peace. The house was mine again. My time was my own again. My bank account was finally working for me instead of against me. For the first time in decades, I was free. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.